Welcome to All Fired Up Radio.
Bringing power through integrity from the belly of the beast, your host and conservative connection, Dr. Jim Robbins.
Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday. How you doing? This is Jim Robbins, senior editorial writer for the Washington Times. You are on the Conservative Connection on All Fired Up Radio. With us, as always, producing in the Great Lone Star State, B. Wilson. How you doing, B?
I'm doing pretty good. It's been a really busy week.
Yeah, it has. What have you been up to? You're doing some new things, aren't you?
I am. I'm working for another team. I've been moonlighting.
No, you're not. Everyone's working on the same team.
I've been moonlighting on the side for a brand new program, up and coming. Great guys. Brett and John Rappaport are doing, as you well know, a show called The Final Say. And so someone we know very well will be on today, I hear.
Who's that?
Well, that would be you, Jim.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, actually, I'm looking forward to it. That'll be a lot of fun, and it's always good to have good new shows out there. And since you'll be involved with it, I know it'll work out just fine.
Well, thank you for your vote of confidence. I truly am just the background, and it's really you guys that are the talent. So they do have a lot of great talent there, and so I'm really pleased to be part of it.
That's outstanding. And let's see, that'll be this afternoon, and they're on 3 days a week now, expanding to 5 days a week later on. Is that right?
I'm not sure when, the 5 days a week, but right now they're on 3 days a week, 2 hours, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then they're expanding, no, did I say 2 hours? 2 hours, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and then they're expanding to 3 hours, 3 days a week. So quite a roster of guests, too, so it's fun.
Fantastic. You know, the more shows we can have, the more voices, the more outlets, the more ways to reach people with the information that they need to make sound decisions, you know, particularly in this political season, the better. So really glad that you are involved with that. Not to mention with this, because, you know, without you, none of this would be happening. You know, this is like Praise Be Day, I guess, but, you know, All Fired Up Radio was your brainchild, so thanks for that.
My pleasure.
Oh, very good. Well, you know, busy week. A lot of things have been going on. I'm certain that foremost in many people's mind was the shooting last week in Aurora, Colorado. And, I mean, everybody said about everything we can about that by now. And it's been hashed over from every possible angle. Whenever a tragedy like that takes place, it centers a lot of attention, and particularly on issues like gun control and other things. And I don't want to get into it too much because by now, I mean, it's almost a week later and everybody's had their say on it. I wrote something the same day for the Washington Times, particularly looking at, well, partly the media angle, because after ABC News rushed out a report linking the shooter to the Colorado Tea Party, I mean, that was just really bad. And it's good that people have focused criticism on ABC for doing that. I think in part that's because of the new media, because of bloggers and other folks out there who have called them to account, that you can't on a major national network just rush out some innuendo. In this case, it was simply a coincidence of someone having the same name and being in the same place as the shooter, a different Jim Holmes. You know, I was poking around the internet, too, looking for people named Jim Holmes, and I found a guy in Aurora, Colorado, an African-American personal trainer. I thought, well, that's probably not the guy because the police are reporting that, you know, the fellow was white. So I'm sure this is not the guy. But it had exactly the same amount of support as Brian Ross's report, a guy named Jim Holmes in Aurora, Colorado. So, yeah, rush out that report. Oh, wait, but wrong ethnicity conflicts with the police report. You can't do it. If only they had known that the guy that they were fingering for the crime was a conservative Hispanic. I mean, the role that identity plays in politics these days is so overwhelming that would never fit their narrative. So that alone would have given them pause. They would say, wait, this guy can't even exist, a Hispanic Tea Partier? How could that even be? No, it can't be that guy because he doesn't actually exist, right? That might have stopped them in their tracks in any case. But now ABC News is saying they're taking steps to make sure that they don't report erroneous information. Oh, good. I mean, they're a news organization. I'm glad they're taking steps. They just thought of that? Don't they have an ombudsman? Which is someone, you know, in a news organization who reviews what they do. You know, I can tell you, just from my point of view, as I hate to say I'm a journalist, you know, I've been an academic. I've worked for the government, for the Defense Department. I've you know, been an analyst. I've done a lot of things. Now I work for a newspaper. Does that make me a journalist? I don't know. I've always been a little uncomfortable with, you know, like when you say that, you're signing on to a lot of things. You know what I mean? Some of them are not that good. But okay, you know, I work for a newspaper. Let's put it that way. And we can't get anything wrong. If you get one thing wrong, you're going to hear about it. It could be something like you quoted the wrong inflation rate or something, you know, something like that, or you said a typo. You could be that you got somebody's title wrong, or you misspelled their name, or you know, you had their age wrong. I mean, you know, something like that. Well, every fact has to be checked. In fact, when we write something, I write something, it goes up to an editor. He looks it over. He does whatever he does. He sends it back to me to look at it again to make sure that it's, you know, he didn't change something that made it incorrect. So I do a quality control check on the editor. Then it's sent to the copy desk, and they check every fact, every name that's mentioned, every number, all that stuff. They do just a very thorough check. Also, you know, things like the style guide. We use AP style guide. So if you're referring to a town or a political party or something, I mean, there are guidelines to make it all consistent because everything in the paper has to be consistent. And how you refer to people in their political party, you know, be something like John Boehner, you know, parentheses, R-O-H, right? And some, well, no, that's not how we do it. Some papers do it that way. We do it, it would be John Boehner, comma, Ohio Republican, comma. You know, that's our style. That's how we do it. The point is every single person in the organization has to use the same style. And we go through all of these checks, and sometimes, yes, things get wrong in there. I mean, you know, someone misses something or, you know, you blow it somehow, and then you run a correction. But that's the level of detail that we have to do our stuff. It can't just be, hey, I spent 5 minutes on the internet and I found a guy by the same name. I'm going to rush it out, you know, on a national TV program going out to millions of people in the midst of a crisis, because a mass killing like that is a national crisis. And I'm just going to throw out some innuendo because I have a political agenda because this guy is connected to the Tea Party. Yeah, okay, great. I'm glad that, you know, I have to spend so much time in my day making sure all of my facts are correct when I could just, like, throw out some garbage. You know, like that. Give me a break.
But that's why you work for, I mean, that's the difference in what you do and what they do. And it's been this way for a number of years, and the people have accepted it. And that is why they continue to get, I mean, they really do continue to get worse and worse at speculation, just in order to be the first on the scene, just in order to be the first ones to break the news. And people allow it. So
well, there is extraordinary pressure.
No longer allowed it. Now the people have said, no, you can't get away with that because of, as I said, because of the new media.
Right. There definitely is pressure to be first on the scene, to have the scoop and all that stuff. I understand that. That has always been true. People say it's new, but it is not. That has always been true in the news game. And the news folks have always pushed the envelope in terms of technology and getting information out. So it's nothing new. It's just that now it's a lot faster because you can blog something out instantly. In fact, just let me digress for a second, but it's funny that maybe you saw this report. The White House has banned tweeting of Vice President Biden's speeches. Because it's just Biden. I guess you could still tweet Obama if you're a reporter. But they said reporters, if you're going to report on the vice president, you can't tweet as he's talking. You have to wait till he's done. I mean, that's how narrow the window is. You know, if Biden says something ridiculous, as he sometimes does, maybe even frequently. I mean, he kind of goes off script and improvises and says wacky things, and then they're tweeted out, and everyone has a good time. But now the White House say no, you cannot tweet the vice president. So what? You have to wait 20 minutes, and then you can report all the goofy things he just said. Is that going to make a difference? Or is it after 20 minutes there'll be so many goofy things that it'll be lost in the shuffle? Is that the idea? I just don't get. They say, well, he has to be heard in context or something. Hey, this is the White House that was bragging a few months ago about having a Twitter town hall. Like, in 140 characters, they're going to tell us about important national policies. I mean, we wrote something then about what a joke that was. So they can have a Twitter town hall because I guess President Obama's wisdom can be reduced to a tweet. But don't you dare Twitter out the goofy thing that the vice president just said. But anyway, it gets back to the point of how everything is immediate these days. But that's all. I mean, like I said, that's always been the case. But it's never been an excuse for not getting it right. In this case, it's particularly egregious. You're talking about one of the biggest mass killings of this type in our country's history. Of a shooting, and just implicating somebody just on the coincidence of their names. And Jim Holmes, that's not like the most unusual name in the world either. I mean, if it was a completely obscure name, maybe that would have made a difference. I doubt it. I mean, you kind of want to have a little bit of confirmation other than I saw it on a website. And, I went to that website, too, where they found this stuff. And like I said, it takes you like a minute. This is your in-depth journalism, right? Your investigative reporting. Oh, I spent a minute on Google. You're trying to make any phone calls, any confirmation, anything like? Because usually, like, you try to call. You could call a contact number. Can you, try to get more than just I saw it on a website? Well, apparently that's, good enough for ABC News. But in any case, I went to that site, and there was a guy who signed up at a Tea Party site, and there was nothing on it. It was like someone who just stopped by, signed up, and never did anything. It was like one event from a long time ago, and the person signed up a long time ago. So it was like an active Tea Party or someone who signed up somewhere or was on a place like Free Republic where there's a very vigorous debate all the time on all kinds of good issues, and someone who made hundreds of posts. Or you find something, like that where another site or Discuss or something like this where you can see everything that someone has said, and then you get an idea who it is. No, this was just a name on a blank page that happened to be a Tea Party page. And so based on that becomes, a report. So great. And now ABC News is looking into it. I don't know. Should Brian Ross lose his job over that? It's an interesting question. I'm not sure about that, losing your job, but definitely something has to happen. I mean, you had NBC News in Florida fired 3 people over those edited 9/11 tapes from the Trayvon Martin shooting. Remember that one where but that's like going out of your way to make something bad. I mean, that, editing a 9/11 or 911 tape. Sorry, I got 9/11 on the brain. But a 911 tape to make it sound much, much worse than it was. As bad as it was, making it sound like really terrible. So, yeah, people should lose their job over that because you are actually changing something. In this case, they just didn't do what reporters are supposed to do on one of the biggest stories of the year, if not the biggest. So who knows? But we'll see what happens. But glad that ABC News is, adopting protocols to tighten up their organization. Maybe they'll get up to Washington Times standards. I'm not sure, but we'll see. In any case, then also there was the gun control angle, and the usual suspect. So when something like this happens, then immediately it becomes, if only there weren't any guns, if only gun sales were illegal, if only these weapons could be taken out of the hands of the nuts. Well, yeah, that'd be a great idyllic world, wouldn't it? Let's apply that everywhere. That'd be fantastic. But it's not going to happen. I mean, it's this utopian thinking. And as we pointed out in our editorial that the Cinemark cinemas had a no-gun policy. So how's that working? Aurora, Colorado had some gun controls, although Colorado in general has pretty good gun laws. But those types of policies, those laws, those restrictions will not keep guns out of the hands of crazy people. There are no gun restrictions that you can imagine that will keep a gun out of the hands of a motivated psychopath who's looking to create mayhem. I mean, in this case, is a good case in point. Did that no gun policy written on the movie ticket have any impact? It had an impact on everybody who was law-abiding, and so they became the victims. But no impact on the thinking of somebody who's hardwired to do crazy things. So saying just, Mayor Bloomberg of New York, we got to get hold of this, or his other great idea, and this is because to show how the sort of cause and effect thinking of the anti-gun folks. He said, I think it was yesterday, that police should go on strike until citizens enact strong gun controls. Well, think about it. Okay, so the police, so you're going to have a situation with no police. The police aren't working. They're on strike. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but wouldn't that promote gun sales? I mean, wouldn't more people be arming themselves if there were no police? Seems to me that you would be going from, whatever percentage of armed citizens we currently have to, up around 100%. That having the police go on strike, but, this is the reasoning. It's like, because the police are the ones who are endangered by having guns on the streets. Yes, law enforcement officers are definitely endangered by guns on the streets in the hands of the criminal element that we're talking about. And in cities with the strongest gun control, you're still going to find these armed criminals. You're just going to find a disarmed population. So the police, what's his cause and effect thinking there? Okay, the police are going to protest. You have to enact gun control laws to protect us. Well, yes, I'm all in favor of anything that helps law enforcement, but that isn't going to help them because the crooks will still have guns. It's just that then the people won't have any protection either. So, again, how would this work in practice if law enforcement folks said, okay, Mayor Bloomberg, we agree with you, we're going to go on strike? How would it work? I mean, wouldn't that be a field day for the bad guys? I just don't get it. But if the NYPD thinks it's a good idea that their mayor is saying go on strike, do a test case in New York. He's the one calling for it. See how it works in his city, right? New York City, without police. Okay. Give it a shot. See what happens.
Well, I think, too, I think that the police recognize also, I don't know about you, but when if we get pulled over here, I live in Houston, and if we get pulled over here and my husband opens his bill hold and on one side it says driver's license and the other side it says concealed to carry, then the police will automatically say, they'll ask him, does he have a weapon, and he'll tell them, and they'll say, okay, that's cool. They know that because he has had to go through training, he has had to go through classes, that he can be trusted with that weapon. So I think that they see him as more an ally, whereas somebody who hasn't gone through those classes is more dangerous. If they search somebody's car and find that, they didn't have a license to carry that they're carrying, they're going to be more suspicious, and they should be.
Oh, absolutely. And, speaking of concealed carry, you do have to ask the question, what would the difference have been in that theater if somebody in there had been able to fire back? I know that Holmes had on body armor. Those are what the reports said. And, it was a chaotic scene. There was tear gas or smoke or something, people rushing about. It wouldn't have been pretty. But the question remains, what's the difference between that scene with nobody being able to fire back and that scene with somebody being able to fire back? Even with body armor, he didn't strike me as an experienced guy. So you take a round in the chest, it'll probably knock the wind out of him. He may not die, but it could knock him down. And who knows? There are just many variables involved. So the people who say sort of, as a panacea, just everybody has to be disarmed. Well, the other side of the coin is, what if some people there other than the shooter were armed? Mm-hmm. And we had that case in Florida where a 71-year-old guy took off after those people at the Internet Cafe. Samuel Williams broke up an armed robbery attempt. Did you see this video? It was out there. It was viral for a couple days. These two 19-year-old punks came into an Internet cafe armed and started threatening people. And this guy got out his concealed weapon and started shooting at them. They took off. And he wounded them. They took off. They were later arrested. And, he broke it up. Now, again, he's firing shots around. Maybe some innocent people could have been hurt. Yeah, there are always these risks. But you know what? When you have two crazed punks with guns threatening people, well, someone can get hurt too. There are no easy answers in these situations. And nobody wants these situations to happen. But people have a right to defend themselves. So, the question remains. We don't know. It's counterfactual. We don't know what would have happened if somebody in that movie theater had been able to return fire. But maybe some more people would be alive today who aren't. It's certainly possible. So, I don't know. But the good news, if there is any, but from a gun control point of view, is that the White House immediately signaled that they weren't going to do anything about this. That was really, you had to read between the lines, but in the White House statement that came out right after this, where the president talked about how they had to work within existing laws. He says about common sense gun control or something, but he said work within existing laws, which means that they're not going to use this as part of the agenda to impose new gun controls. Essentially, the White House is saying, we choose not to fight this battle. So, other people were out there doing it, trying to promote this. But the president, who, presumably would be the leader of the charge, if, to get legislation or something else or new policies or what have you, no, they said, no, we're going to work within existing laws, meaning we're not picking this up. So, that's good. So it's not going to, at a federal level, at least from the White House level, this will not be used as a means to try to attempt a new round of gun control. So at least that's something. Now it's down to learning about what this guy's motives were, what he thought was happening. Presumably they'll try some kind of insanity plea. I don't know. Who knows? It's just such a sick, sad situation. But I do know that banning guns is not going to solve it. And speaking of that, I wanted to transition into another important topic, which is this UN gun treaty that has a lot of people excited. And there's bad news and there's good news with this treaty. Let's start with the bad news. This has been a proposal. It's been out there for a long time, something called the Arms Trade Treaty, ATT. And this has been discussed for years. I mean, they're all long-term proposals that kind of go through the UN like a pig through a python, just sort of slowly moving along. And it had been around during the George W. Bush administration, which sensibly opposed this treaty. The Obama administration changed that policy coming in 2009, said, oh, no, we're in favor of this treaty. Let's push it along. And the treaty covers international arms transfers at the non-nuclear level. And it's not just things like handguns or ammunition. It could be vehicles, tanks, helicopters, could be ships. Anything, any non-nuclear weapon, basically, would be covered under the Arms Trade Treaty. And its official reason for being is to try to get hold of illicit arms transfers that are used for bad purposes, like genocide or something, or illegal conflicts, just for the way that arms are misused. But again, how you know in advance that arms are going to be misused is an interesting question. It's funny to me that the countries that are most pushing for this thing are rogue states. I mean, just to put it bluntly, countries like Cuba, Cuba's really behind. Syria, North Korea, Iran, they're really interested in this treaty. I'm not exactly sure, because they don't want people to be able to buy arms to defend themselves. Is that the reason why? I mean, you got to figure that if a group, on the one hand, you have Syria, North Korea, Iran, and Cuba, and then on the other side you have like the U.S., Britain, Germany, and France. Which side of that equation do you want to be on? I don't really want to side with Iran on anything. So, that alone just tells you a lot about this treaty. But the idea is to get a handle on this and do it through the UN, have international controls on arms transfers. And it's not just a question of like the right to bear arms and things like that. It's a question of business. The U.S. and Russia, for example, Britain, Germany, France, are manufacturers of arms and export like $70 billion worth of weapons a year. So it's big business. And you don't want to have an international body, like the UN in particular, trying to set up regulations to get in the way of a flourishing arms trade. So that's part of it. But the other part, and this is the thing that's really getting people excised in this country, is the question of whether this poses a threat to Second Amendment rights. And the proponents of the treaty and other folks are saying, no, you're crazy. This is an international arms control treaty. It has nothing to do with domestic weapons, blah, blah, blah. But these are the same folks who want to read international law into constitutional law. It's sort of, the same end of the spectrum. And the other part of it is saying, well, it's international trade. It doesn't govern intra-national, like, within this country. But, look at the history of the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, which, Article 1, Section 8, and how it originally was intended to regulate interstate trade, but then was expanded to regulate practically anything. I mean, we heard a lot about this during the Obamacare debates, or the case of Wickard v. Filburn back from the 40s, where a farmer was denied growing chicken feed on his own land because somehow it affected interstate trade. Like, because he was growing that feed, he wouldn't be buying feed that might have come from across state lines. And that is good enough to bring it under the Commerce Clause? Growing food for your own animals on your own land? You can't get more non-commercial than that. The guy wasn't even buying anything. It was like, well, he would have bought something. It's the same thing about, that we're forcing you to buy insurance that you would have bought anyway. Well, maybe you wouldn't have bought it anyway. Well, we're going to force you to. Okay, great. That's America. I'm glad freedom is still alive. So with that, but with that kind of thinking out there, you have to look at something that's an international arms trade agreement and say, hey, it doesn't take much of a liberal jurist to be able to extend something like this to affect trade within the country. Because when you look at the draft language of the treaty, it's pretty broad in scope. It seeks to regulate arms import, export, transfer, brokering, manufacture under foreign license, and technology transfer. And so then you say, hey, that handgun that's being manufactured in the United States, it's using some parts from Canada. Therefore, it's part of international arms transfer. Therefore, we're going to regulate it under this treaty. And that would be a no-brainer. That's not even a stretch. You say, well, you transferred parts of it, therefore the whole gun comes under it. Oh, yeah, that's easy. You could read that one into jurisprudence, no problem. And if you want to extend it to the sort of Wickard v. Filburn logic, well, we're going to regulate it because even though you bought certain parts domestically, you might have bought them from overseas had you not bought them domestically. Okay, if you want to go to that extent, great. That logic is already there in the case law. And then, as I said before, not to mention all the jurists who just say, we should just bring international law in, because under the Constitution, check it out, Article 7, I believe, treaties that are signed and ratified have the force of constitutional law. So it's very easy, actually, to read that in. You just do it. Judges could just do it. They're already, talking about it. They're just going to read international law in. We had, Justice Breyer, I think, was talking about this last year. Oh yeah, we have to start thinking about this. International norms, not even treaties, but just international norms. What the heck is it? Define international norm for me. Show me where in the world there is a norm that everybody agrees on. But no, it's what they call customary practices. And under international law, those things have the force of law, what they call customary practices. But those can mean anything. All you have to do is declare it a custom. Yeah, believe it. Madeleine Albright did this back during when we were intervening in the Balkans and bombing Yugoslavia, and we're trying to justify it under the UN Charter, even though it was intervening in the internal affairs of that country. And she said, well, it's part of customary norms. And so I said, no, there's no such norm. And the State Department position was, it's an evolving standard. No, this is it, official policy. It's a norm. It's evolving. Why is it evolving? Because we just did it. We're bombing them. Therefore, it's evolving. Okay. Hey, is that how it works? Great. So when you have an international legal regime that is that flexible, and a treaty that is this comprehensive, and judges that are willing to connect the two, hey, you got to watch out. That's bad. That's just bad news. And so the people who are upset about this, as a threat to our Second Amendment rights, yeah, they should be. And the people say, oh, no, it has nothing to do with it. Yeah, because why? Because you're the same people who talk about the living Constitution and, inventing things to read into it, like abortion rights and stuff, and saying that the letter of this treaty is going to govern it. The letter itself is bad, at least in the draft that was released. Combine that with sort of the flexible notions of interpretation, and it could be used for anything. So yeah, don't tell us it's not a threat. Go back to the Obamacare debate and look at all the contortions people were going through to make that thing make sense. Please, don't insult us. Okay, so that's all the bad news. But hey, there's good news. The good news is it's not going to happen. This treaty is not going to happen for a variety of reasons. Well, number one, even if they're supposed to come up with a draft, like a final draft for review. And bear in mind, this process has been going on for about 6 years. And they had like drafts for discussion and stuff like that. But then last weekend, everyone was getting around the table and like hashing out all of their concerns, and to produce a draft to present Monday for then like a week of final debate, and then on Friday they're going to vote on it. Well, the thing over the weekend didn't work out. There's too many objections. They were supposed to produce a draft Monday. It didn't happen. It didn't appear Tuesday. Now they're talking about today. They're going to come up with a draft. And this is for a vote on Friday. So this complicated, arcane treaty that's been argued about bitterly. And so the General Assembly is going to have 2 days to look at it and bam, vote on it, and then we're supposed to sign it. I don't think so. I wonder if they're even going to come up with anything, or if the whole thing, possibility number one, it just collapses. They just don't get it done, and then they punt. They just kick the can down the road and say, we'll do it later. We've been at it for 6 years. We'll give it another shot another time. That actually, for the proponents of this thing, that might be their best move, because it's the only way they're going to get what they want. Because if they do it now, they're going to have a really bad treaty. From their point of view, I'm talking about the proponents of this. They're going to have a bad treaty because it's being watered down. It's being eviscerated. It's just being changed too much for them. Even the United States is even taking a very good stand, which is we want ammunition taken out of it. I'm not exactly sure why the administration wants ammunition accepted from this, except for the fact that we produce a ton of it and export it all over the world. That might have something to do with it. But again, can you imagine? You can't buy ammunition because the UN treaty is in the way. There was some ingredient in the gunpowder that came from, Brazil. Therefore, the whole bullet comes under control of the treaty. Yes, that would happen. But anyway, like I said, the good news is, and there's a really good place to look called armstreaty.blogspot.com, which is a blog by somebody who's actually a proponent of the treaty, but who's an insider, who's got all the inside dope, and is involved with this, going to the meetings and blogging about it and talking about how it's all gooned up, it's not going to happen, blah, blah, blah. Well, great. This person is upset about it, but I'm not. I think it's fantastic. So really, the bad news is, bad treaty. The good news is probably not going to happen. And even if they come up with some hokey draft today or tomorrow that's voted on Friday and passed by the General Assembly, and even if it's signed by the President, because he has said he wants to sign something like this, because he needs a foreign policy achievement, because he doesn't really have any, and we'll get to that in a minute maybe if we have time. Even if all that happens, the Senate will not ratify this treaty. There is no way that they're going to get a 2/3 vote out of the Senate to ratify this thing. It's just not going to happen. So even if the treaty's out there, it won't be implemented by the United States. So, but I'll tell you, that probably will not stop judges from trying to read it into something if they want to. They'll just say it's part of the evolving international standard because it's out there. And, however many score of nations will sign on to it. And they'll say, well, 90 nations have signed on to this treaty. What's our problem? It's part of the International Code of Conduct. We're the rogue state, not them. Yeah, tell me another one. Maybe we should be the rogue state. Rogue states for freedom? If most of the countries in the world are not free, does that make us the rogue state? Should we do what they're doing? I don't think so. Anyway, so yeah, follow the gun treaty. Get up to date, though, because there's a lot of stuff out there. It's just like being recycled from old reports. You got to get the latest stuff. And so, search on Google News or something. Try to get the latest information, because you can't really get it because all the meetings are closed door. They don't want transparency. They're not going to let you know what's going on until they release that draft. But it should be out today or tomorrow. If it comes out Friday and they press for a vote on it, that just really reinforces what a crock this whole process is. When it's supposed to have a General Assembly is going to debate this major international treaty, it's like, more of a Pelosi kind of thing. Just pass it, and, you'll figure out what's in it after you pass it. Vote for it first, read it later. Seems to be the way things happen these days. In any case, moving on to the economy, I'm very interested in something else that's going to be happening Friday, which is we're going to get the quarterly GDP numbers for the, I guess it'd be the spring, April, May, June. And that'll be interesting, won't it? Because you're only going to get 2 more GDP readings between now and the election, the one that comes out Friday and then 3 months later. So at the end of October, right before the election, we'll get another sounding on the GDP. And so it should be interesting to see how bad it is, because there have been a lot of signs, like lower consumer spending, increasing weekly unemployment. My thing I talk about every week, how they fake those numbers. They did it again last week, by the way. They did the same old song. They announce it one week, and then they raise it. And they did that last week again. They've done it every single week this year. Oh, yes, I've been keeping track. I have a spreadsheet. If it's on a spreadsheet, it must be right. But no, I look every week at the reports. Every single week they revise it upward after the fact. Okay, so they did it again. But the point is that the weekly unemployment numbers keep going up. The overall unemployment number is still bad. It's going to get worse. And the GDP number, the growth, the economic activity measure, is going to go down. They were talking about 3% growth this year. They're going to be lucky to get 1%. And we'll see what it is Friday. Speculation is like in the 1.5% range. I mean, anemic. Where were we in 1984 at this time under Ronald Reagan? 7%. Hey, not bad. Tell me again how Obama's like Reagan. 7% growth, right. Okay, so maybe we'll come in at 1% Friday. I don't know. I don't want to predict. So, but we will see. Here's a really good quote. Listen to this. The president has no credibility. He is deliberately misrepresenting the economic numbers. Here's a person with a terrible record on government spending, a terrible record on jobs, and a person who broke his word on taxes. He has no credibility. Isn't that a great quote? I love that quote. You know who said that? Bill Clinton. He said that in 1992, August 6th, referring to President Bush the first. He was talking about economic numbers that are very similar, if not better, than the ones we have today. 1992 is a very interesting year to look at in this respect because, of course, Bush the first, George H.W. Bush, he was a one-term president. He had an economic record that at this point in his term was a little bit better than what we have right now. Or to put it another way, right now is a little bit worse than, well, actually, in some respects, in terms of debt and debt as a percentage of GDP, unemployment is higher, growth is lower. In a lot, it's a lot worse. So go back and see what Bill Clinton, candidate Clinton, was saying about the economy of 1992. Very interesting. He said, today's economic statistics confirm what the American people have been trying to tell the president for some time now. We are in a crisis, an economic crisis, unquote. And he said that after a second quarter GDP announcement of 1.4%. Okay, what's it going to be Friday? 1.4%? 1.4% is like the consensus. It could be even lower. You know, the Brits issued their report today, the UK, negative 0.7. Bad news. I mean, certainly bad for them, probably bad for everybody. So what's it going to be? Will Bill Clinton's quote be operative this time? Mr. Clinton, can we get your comment? Because 20 years ago you said that the, you know, a growth rate of this level was a crisis that the president was ignoring. He offers nothing more than blame and more of the same, said Mr. Clinton, referring to Mr. Bush. Could we say that about Mr. Obama? Nothing more than blame and more of the same. Oh, yeah. Believe me, this is Friday's editorial. I'm going to remind people of some of these quotes because this is just fantastic. Yeah, Bill Clinton. Hey, don't ask me. Ask Slick Willie. Okay, we have a caller. I understand. B, is that right? I can't hear you. I know B is talking because I can see her on Skype, but I can't hear anything.
Brett from New Jersey is on hold. Hi, Brett.
Hi, Jim. Excellent show. And you couldn't be more correct with your discussion here on the unemployment numbers and the economic figures. And, of course, the Obama administration has been trying to paint this wonderful picture that his policies are doing, you know, a beautiful thing for the American people, when quite the opposite. Not only are the numbers that they're putting out there constantly being revised upward or downwards in the wrong direction, but let's not forget that for a couple of years now, they have changed the calculation of the unemployment number itself, where they've removed millions of people from the base calculation. So, in other words, if we had done that during the Bush years, the unemployment would have been as low as 3% during the Bush years. You know, and where we know that, you know, we hit 10%, and all of a sudden overnight it became 8%. That wasn't because we had hired people; it's because we simply dropped people from the calculation to begin with. So it is much worse than we look at, and also we also know that there are so many people who are underemployed, and we're not seeing the correct numbers here. Is what the point is.
That is absolutely right. If you go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics site, and we always, on the show, we always like to tell people, look it up. Because, you know, there's so many ways to get information. But just go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website and the Labor Department and look it up. All of the participation rate, which is the key statistic, they keep shedding people from the overall workforce. And the official unemployment rate is just based on the number of people who are either employed or not employed but looking for work, or unemployment. But those who are discouraged, those who drop out, they're not counted. And millions of people have been dropped out of the system and are not counted. And if you add those people to the number of unemployed, you're talking about record highs. The participation rate is lower than it has been for decades. And, yeah, it gives a false impression of how things are going. But they can't do this forever. Eventually, it's going to catch up to them. I think it's catching up to them now. The last round of unemployment, they tried to shed some more people from the workforce, but they couldn't shed enough for the unemployment number not to go up. Because the only reason it's been going down is because of this, as you mentioned, dropping people out. Last month they couldn't do it. It went up a tick. You know, next month it'll probably go up some more. And once we see these growth figures, that's really going to bring home the message to people that what we're doing isn't working. The president said, I believe it was yesterday, I saw the quote yesterday at a fundraiser, great place, that we tried our plan and it works, he said. But, yeah, America is not working. He said they tried the plan and it works, but who's working? Because it sure isn't all the people without a job who are out there in record numbers, or the people who are underemployed or what have you.
And, I heard you mention the word credibility and Clinton, and which is funny to begin with. But
right. It's funny he knew the word.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that there are so many people who were still supporting the president and supporting his policies when, if you took away the R and the D from behind the people involved in the political hemisphere today, and you just looked at the actual result honestly, I think that people would see clearly that we're failing, that the economy is growing at the slowest pace out of a recession in modern economic history, that we should be growing at 5% and 6% paces right now. We should have been, at some point, we should have had a couple quarters of probably in the 8% range. And like you said, we're barely 1%.
Yeah, and barely 1% is not really growth.
No, it doesn't even keep up with inflation.
Well, exactly. That's the point. Yeah, when you factor in inflation and factor in the amount of debt that the government has had to assume, even to make it that much, even to make it 1% with all the stimuli and failed investments and other things that are out there. When you take it apart, you're really not talking about a growing economy. You're talking about stagnation. And seeing the British coming in with negative growth, that should scare a lot of people. I don't know what the markets are doing today, but that's a little scary because whatever's going on in Europe is going to affect us as well, whether it's through export markets or them buying our debt, which they can't do anymore. Now we have to rely on China to do it. It's a global economy, so if they're shrinking, odds are we're not going to be growing, or at least not much. So,
yeah,
but again,
I saw that on the UK, and it is scary. And I guess that they've been in a double dip recession now, which I think we've always been frightful that it could happen here.
Oh, I think it is happening here, particularly when you look at the job numbers and the growth numbers. We did have 3% growth about 18 months ago, and it's been declining every quarter. So if the trend doesn't reverse, we'll be heading into negative territory too. But I have to say, coming right before election, it's a good time for that to happen. I mean, if people want to know the consequences of the policies that we've been pursuing, then here they are. It couldn't be more vivid. I'm sure that President Obama would like to be going into an election with 3%, which is anemic too, but it's better than 1%. He may even be going in with below 1%. So how does he explain how America is working, how his plan is working, if we have growth rates like that? I don't think he can legitimately make the case. They're going to do it because, they don't really talk about reality when they, in their talking points. They talk about vision and hope and, the failed policies of the past. But right now, the failed policies are the present. They're what we have right now. So polling that shows that Mr. Romney is pulling ahead on people's opinions of who can do best for the economy are really heartening, but I think they reflect that reality that people are finally waking up.
Yeah, well, who's really waking up? The people who are out of work for 3 years and have lost their homes one thing I didn't mention, what's frightening is that the unemployment rates for the certain minority groups that would probably be his core constituents are much higher than any other group. And you would think that they would recognize that the policies fail.
I've always found that to be ironic, that minority groups or like young people who are out of work are also core groups that are going to vote for the guy whose policies have not helped them. I don't know. I find that sort of a conflict of self-interest. If they would only understand that their future is not with this guy. That who knows? Maybe they could turn it around. I'm not sure.
Well, I don't know if they're waiting for like sustainable unemployment, permanent payments to stay at home, or what the deal is. But surely a family can't live off of the payments that you get from any of these programs. It's just simply not enough unless you're living in a somewhere for free. But I mean, who could afford their rent on what you get from unemployment or any other government program, let alone putting food on the table or paying your other bills? And simply the only way to make it anywhere for that matter is to go out there and work hard and to be successful in a job and create your own way.
Yeah, it would be nice if Mr. Obama allowed us to do that. Well, in any case, Brett, I want to thank you for your call. I got a few more things to do.
Sure, thank you.
Brett Rappaport, host of the Final Say radio show, owner of Rappaport Media, checking in with us. And as B said, actually, I'll be stopping by there later to talk more about the UN gun treaty. Maybe there'll be a draft of the treaty by then that we can discuss. But, given the way the UN works, I doubt it.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. Take care, Jim.
Okay, thanks, Brett.
Bye.
In the few remaining moments, a few minutes, one thing I want to talk about was Chick-fil-A. Speaking of successful businesses and the trouble they've gotten into for their owner, Dan Cathy's talking about the traditional family unit. Boy, you'd think that just talking about something like that suddenly, and then the Muppets are mad at you. And homosexual activists are calling for boycotts and stuff like that. Wow. Chick-fil-A used to give away the Washington Times at their outlets, and then that promotion stopped for some reason. I think it was during a period in which the newspaper was undergoing some cuts of its own. But, we've corrected that, and we're back now. So, hey, Chick-fil-A guys, you should be giving away the Washington Times again to your folks because, we support you a lot. And there's a movement on to show support for Chick-fil-A for their stand for family values. And today, in fact, is one of the 2 days, this week and then next Wednesday, which are official Eat a Chick-fil-A days. So I don't know if there's one close to you, but, it's almost lunchtime. So, hey, check it out. Why not? I have to go a couple miles to get to one, but, once the show's over, I think I'll go do that. Because why not? Show a little support for those folks. And there was some other fun things going on. This thing with James Caan, did you see this? The actor coming out saying he's a conservative, he only watches Fox News. I thought that was pretty cool. He said he's not a Hollywood liberal type, and he resents it. Rock on, man. Fantastic. Another good guy. And then John Lovitz versus Ellen Barkin. I mean, John Lovitz, from Saturday Night Live, who's, he's a liberal and an Obama supporter. He just hates high taxes. Like a sensible, self-interested liberal who opposes high taxes. John F. Kennedy cut taxes. And Ronald Reagan, when he did his tax cut plan, it was in part modeled on the Kennedy plan. I mean, that was back when liberals at least had a clue. So here John Lovitz, is getting in this, tweeting match with Ellen Barkin, who, used expletives to describe him and other right-wingers. Ellen Barkin, I had to look up who that was. I'm sorry, I'm just not in tune with things. But she should stop barking, in my opinion. And in any case, so yeah, shout out to James Caan and John Lovitz for being stand-up guys. And now we're down to our final minute. I just want you to know that in Iran, this is hilarious. I don't know if you saw this report. It was in El Arabiya. I'm sure you all read El Arabiya. But at two of there's a new virus that's circulating over there, a computer virus in their nuclear facilities. At Natanz, another facility near Qom, the technicians were treated to a spontaneous concert when their computers suddenly started blaring AC/DCs hit Thunderstruck at full volume. That whoever got this virus in their facilities, hitting them with Thunderstruck. It's coming, guys. Next is Bob Dylan. A hard rain is gonna fall. Guess what, Iran? It's coming. Anyway, folks, have a great week, everybody. Chick-fil-A, it's in my future. Yours too, I hope. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Military Monday with Betty Kilbride is an All Fired Up Radio original broadcast. Our next live broadcast, Words Matter with Mary Weeks, will air on Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. To listen to more All Fired Up Radio podcasts, go to www.allfiredupmedia.com.